It's the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in.
That's so crazy because everybody who's listening to this has some concept of what a sports facility is. Some maybe
Right.
you're athletes or you probably had one in your town where you or city where you lived at.
Sure.
And I never thought about all this stuff. Like it seems like it's a very meticulous and data driven process, especially as you mentioned, just doing the feasibility studies, like looking at the demographics, what they do, what they spend money on. I never connected the two and thought that information would feed into the design and ultimately what a sports complex in a particular city would look like. So that's pretty crazy, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's always this good saying I always heard: where there's mystery, there's margin. You know, and like there's a ton of mystery, and once you figure all of that stuff out, there's a lot of margin to be made. But generally, this is probably not well known either, but sports facilities, the best ones are just breaking even. To be honest with you,
Really?
there's very few that are really blowing it out of the water. And we can talk a little bit about why that is, but the truth of the matter is, you know, there's only so many hours in the day. You're almost playing from behind, right? When you have a sports facility, so you got to plan meticulously, because if you don't, you're losing out on these hours that you can never get back, right? So if I got a Monday from 5 to 9 and I don't fill it, I'll never get that Monday back, right? I got to maximize for that Monday, so I got to fill it. And the way a lot of people fill it are a few ways. We talked about some of the actual sports that you can play, but then you got to talk about the programming piece of it. So there's generally three types of things you can do. You can have a league, which is the most consistent. You can have a tournament, which is also fairly consistent. Or you can have programming, which could be a lesson, maybe a group lesson or what have you. And then lastly, you can have your rentals, which is basically saying, hey, this is the space, pay me for it, do whatever you want on the time with that time on that space. So sports facility operators have to decide between those four on every single dollar per, or actually a space per hour, or per minute or per unit, whatever unit you want to use to measure. But they have to decide on that, because if they don't, really, like I said, you'll never get that back.
Yeah.
So some people allot certain hours for rentals and say, put it on their website, hey, this is for rentals, you know when to rent it, boom. Some people allot certain hours for leagues, and that's pretty clear. Some people allot hours for tournaments, and tournaments primarily happen on the weekends. So a really good facility, there's some really good ones out, all over the country, but I've seen ones that just do all rentals. So all they do literally is just collect the check and say, here, don't get hurt. We'll watch over you, but they're not operating anything, right? They're just basically the landlord. Here you are, here's the time, they rent it. That's a really good model. It's a lazy model, right? But it's a really good model, because there's very little liability in that, right? You're not worried about if someone's going to fill it or not. If they're there, great. I've seen people have a little mix of everything, but I think the best leagues, in my opinion, the best places have a good mix of leagues and tournaments.
Mhm.
I saw there was a facility that I was helping out with. It was, gosh, I want to say 200,000 square feet, so
Wow.
pretty big. Turf fields all over. I mean, they did more than a million in tournaments a year, and more than a million in leagues a year, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it's an exceptionally well run organization. But you got to think, leagues it's a community product, right?
Yeah.
When you have a league, your people who are constituents in that town, they're coming every week. They're coming, right? They're coming on schedule because you have a schedule for them, and that's at least 8 to 10 weeks of guaranteed revenue, right? Which is a really, really, reliable product to have. That's why a lot of facilities go leagues on the weekdays, because it's a very reliable product. You go adult leagues, youth leagues, doesn't matter. As long as I can say 10 weeks out of the year, I know this is going to be filled. That's perfect. And generally they break the year up in 4 or 5 pieces. So when you get, you got 50 some odd weeks in the year, if you can break that up into 10 different or 5 different pieces, you got 10 weeks. That's 1/5 of my 1/5 of my year. That space is covered. I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great problem to have. Like when you know that it's actually not a problem. It's a great benefit to have. Because, you know, not only will you make money on them coming in for the league, but you also make money when they want to get a Gatorade, right, in your concessions, or when they want to get fries or chips or anything like that. So it's a really, really consistent product. One of the more lucrative products, in my opinion, are tournaments, which are primarily run on weekends. So when you have a tournament, the reason why it's so lucrative is because you're charging a premium for a very small amount of time. So in a league, you know, I get you paying me, you know, you pay me up front for a certain amount of time, and you're coming over the course of 10 weeks. In a tournament, you pay me a certain amount, a premium amount, to play maybe one game, maybe two games, maybe three games, right? The better teams are going to probably they're going to make out better than we will. But the bad teams won't make out at all, because they'll maybe lose a few games and they're out of the tournament, right? And then you get a ton of highly concentrated visitors. When you have tournaments, you have parents, grandparents, cousins, uncles. They all come to watch. They all come to watch, and they're all eating at the concession stand, right? And they're all staying at hotels, right? And they're all traveling with their rental cars. So this is all really good stuff for the community, for the city. And this is why it's so lucrative, because not only are you making money from the tournament, but you're also making money on ancillary ways, concessions. You're making money from rebates that you might have with certain restaurants, right? You're making money from rebates with hotels. That's a big piece of revenue in the sports facility industry. So generally what happens is, I say I'm running a tournament on this weekend. I know I already have 100 teams scheduled to come, right? I'm actually have they call this holding rights to a tournament. So I'm a rights holder to the tournament. I can go to a hotel, and if some of the people who might have, you know, soccer teams or whatever, you go ahead and do this, because the hotels, listen, I have 100 teams coming. I'm guaranteeing they're coming. They don't know where to stay. Like now, so you go to maybe a visitors bureau. That's one way you can go do it. Where visitors bureau basically works for the state or the city, and they're funded all by hotel tax revenue. So you can go to visitors bureau and they can set it up for you, or you go to a specific hotel that you like, or maybe, you know, you have a relationship with, and you say, for every room you book, I want $10 back and 10% of every single room. And that's very standard in this industry. So you get your 10 and 10 is what they call it. I've seen 10 and 25. I've seen 20 and 25, right? So you get your $10, 10% for every room that's booked, because I know that they're registering for my tournament. And the hotel will gladly do that, because hotels struggle on weekends, right? They struggle they struggle to get people in on weekends. They succeed on the weekdays because they get a lot of business travel, but on the weekends is where they struggle. And this is why some hotels have sales roles primarily for youth sports, and that's all they do. They connect with teams and rights holders and make sure that they're making sure these teams are coming to their place and not somewhere else.
Man, my mind is kind of blown right now, because I played basketball growing up through high school, and you know, we play all over the place. I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. We played all over the place. You know, we pay our little $5, $10 to play here, play there. But I kind of wish I knew about like the operations of it and these kind of things when I was a kid. I mean, who knows, just to know, or maybe I would have tried to be in that industry. I mean, I like sports. So, man, this is some great information.
Yeah, no, it was a great time. You know, I learned a ton. I learned a ton about business. I think the biggest misconception is when you walk into a huge facility, you automatically think that they're making money, right? Because it's so big, and maybe you come in a really busy day, like, man, this place is wild. Go in there on a Tuesday morning. Go in there on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm sure you could probably hear the phone ring in that facility, right? Because generally they struggle with that. And then the hardest time for any facility, by far, hands down, especially an indoor facility, is the summer, because it's so nice outside. So generally what you have is you have to build camp products. That falls under the programming category. So when you build camp products, you're basically trying to make sure that is in and of itself a very competitive market, summer camps. So, I mean, you're competing with band camp, you know, you're competing with reading camp, and, you know, maybe you have a famous sports player who has a camp or whatever. They camp at, you know, maybe a specific, you know, place. So there's tons of competition. So youth sports facilities are trying to find creative ways to get people in the doors in the summer when it's hot, even though they know no one wants to be indoors during the summertime, right? So it's a very, very competitive time. And generally that's where you see a dip in revenue for generally every single facility, except for the weekends, because as you mentioned, when you're on a travel team, that's generally when they travel in the summertime, and that's generally where you kind of make up a ton of money on that end. But weekdays, very barren. Barren is really, really barren.
Hi everyone, Sam here from the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Make sure to hit that notification bell and that subscribe button, and to visit us at blackrealestatedialogue.com.